All right, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully, you enjoyed the presentation and especially the live demo of VMDR at this VMDR live event. And again, thank you, everyone, for attending and staying behind for this section. And here we're going to get a customer perspective about how the customers today see how VMDR is really going to help solve some of the challenges that they are facing today in the day-to-day world. And here with me from Dallas, Fort Worth, is Georges Bellefontaine, and he works for Toyota Financial. Toyota Financial has been a long-time customer of Qualys, and I thank George for taking the time. So, George, thank you, and welcome to this event.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So before we get into talking about shop, let's hear from you how today you are kind of seeing this change environment and the change world, and maybe you can start by giving a little background on what you do with Toyota Financial, large global organization, and then maybe give a little perspective of how things have changed since. The whole work from home has come up, and how that has impacted security, and what you guys are seeing right now, and how you are addressing that.
All right. Well, Toyota Financial Services is spread across multiple countries across the world. We here in the United States are spearheading this effort. We support all of the countries by offering Qualys to each one of them. We manage all that from a central location here. The use of Qualys in its origins many years ago was just used for doing patch management. In other words, it was the tool to discover what needed to be patched or what needed to be hardened. Since the changes, Qualys has added more and more modules and has added more and more data to the collection of data that they form. And we've been using this data to better improve our risk posture across the organization. One of the things that VMDR has been offering to me, which is much more than I've ever had before in my hands, is an asset management tool that's much more accurate than what we've ever had. The fact that we're able to better understand our assets, we not only just perform authenticated scans, but we've deployed agents to over 10,000 of our devices, servers and mobile devices, that it has improved the value and the quantity of data, such as if we're looking to see if just one piece of software is installed from a licensing point of view, or if we need to patch, something as simple as Wireshark. There are so many small pieces of software that are used by some of the engineers and architects that are usually not maintained as part of a big organization doing their patch management program. We're able to identify those outliers, which is much better than what we've ever done before. Because of having all that data and having it organized better, because we're using the asset management side of Qualys to better understand and break up the organization. For example, each one of our countries is in their own business unit. We've also set up networks within each one of those, so if there's overlapping IP space. But by doing that, we're able to do a measured key risk indicator, KRI, off of each one of the countries and compare them to one another. That comparison is, I'd like to, in very layman's terms, use it as the wall of shame. So in other words, we compare each of the countries against one another, and we use, this country is doing better than you, so why can't you do the same in that area?
It does work, doesn't it? And I think what you highlight is really important, that before you get into any complicated calculation of risk and all of that, the most basic of requirements today is just knowing what you have on the network and the asset management piece. And there's just no magic bullet. There's just no one way of doing it. So and it's not static, right? It's dynamic. It's ever changing. And I think that's a hard time that most organizations have, just trying to get that visibility. And as you mentioned, it's not just about the hardware. It's also getting down to the details of why are people using Wireshark in an environment, and maybe they downloaded it once and used it and never updated it. So I think it's really the starting point for any strong security program, I would say.
And really, Qualys has stepped up to the plate to identify to know what you don't know. In other words, the way you discover, in the past, you just were looking at versions of software so that we knew what to patch because they had CVEs, they had vulnerabilities, on and so forth. We're looking at the hardening in a very similar fashion. But now we're able to put much more context, metadata associated with that, and we're able to use your tool to better associate things. We're using tagging to its extreme so that we can relate for example, the cloud assets that we would have to a particular business unit, so that we can make sure that those assets are reported correctly to the right owners who would influence change on those devices. So our idea is not only to just tell people go patch. Our idea is to influence change in the environment and assist in re-architecting. Like every big business, I believe you'll see that there's a lot of companies that still have end-of-life software and operating systems. What we're doing is we're using Qualys to identify those, but we're also taking it one step further, and we're trying to push for compensating controls, such as using the network and isolating those devices if at all possible. So there are many different things that we use the Qualys data, and much more of it than we ever have in the past.
And I think that's a great point, that you have the starting point. You find out about your assets, but at the end of the day, it's you need to do something about it, whether it's quarantine the device, or at least know what needs to be done, or block the device, or patch the device. And I think your point of the auto organization with tags is important. This is something I mentioned earlier in my presentation as well. Is uh, assets are changing so dramatically and dynamically, and most people don't have an idea. So the ability to kind of have that uh, asset tagging capability, which dynamically keeps your assets organized, I think helps quite a bit. And then, of course, from that you get into the assessment piece, and you guys have rolled out the agents in addition to some of the scanning capability, which kind of gives a much more holistic approach. But of course, that gives you a lot of in-depth information about a lot of the vulnerabilities that you have, and prioritization also becomes quite important. So wanted to see how you are tackling that today, and what are you seeing right now in terms of uh, how you prioritize, because there is no sort of one size fits all prioritization approach, because it changes by the assets. So curious to see what you think about that.
Well, to your point, okay, things change fast. And I would like to take you down a path of looking at Kubernetes or Docker, in other words, that whole environment. Your tool is able to go in and look at the images of those inside of each one of those environments and give us vulnerability analysis of it. The thing about managing it at the image level is that we could have in a few minutes 200 images launched, and then as devices, as microservices, and then they could be turned down within the next 3 minutes. So it's so dynamic, so difficult. It would be extremely difficult to go chase down each one of those devices if we didn't have access to looking at the images in the back end. So because of the connectors that you have and the way that we actually look at those environments, we're able to stay much more attuned. It's the same thing in a slower way for any of the cloud environments, AWS or Google Cloud, or any of Azure. What we're getting from you with your connectors is a true representation of the environment because they go so fast in deploying. They're using scripts, Terraform scripts, for example, in our case, that they're pushing new builds and then tearing them down in a matter of hours or days. If we
Right.
were doing the traditional scanning method, we wouldn't be able to stay on top of it. We'd just, we'd be playing whack-a-mole.
That's true. It's such an ephemeral environment, and so the best way to be able to get a handle of that security is to be able to integrate whatever tools you have right up front in the DevOps life cycle with the CI/CD, so that you can eliminate as much as you can beforehand. And then, of course, there's going to be other devices that you have on the network that don't necessarily that you don't build or you don't deploy. So for that today, how are you guys looking at prioritization of the exploits and threats and active things? Is that active attacks or things like that? Are those something that is relevant in getting that threat intelligence directly available, so you can make better decisions on what needs to be fixed first, just given how many vulnerabilities are out there today that are being detected? Because the better you get at detecting vulnerabilities, the more things that you have to fix, right?
Well, one of the things our Security Operations Center has done, I'm providing to them access to the threat module,
Hmm.
Threat Protect, and also to IOC. So because we're providing that kind of information, the neatest part that you bring to the table with your tools is you've already correlated. So in other words, you have feeds as well that you're feeding in. And if the
Right.
vulnerability is identified from a feed, you actually tell us what assets have that vulnerability. So it takes much less time for the analyst to go and start investigating because he has a list to work from. The other thing too that I hope Qualys is realizing is that some of in here in the United States we have a very large organization, very large. I mean, at the facility just here in Dallas Fort Worth area, we're over 7,000 people on campus. So one of the things that I want to identify to you is that in some of the other countries, it is quite small. It is so small that it could be a mom and pop shop that you may have more IP addresses in your home than some of the smaller organizations that we have in other countries.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so no, seriously, I mean, what we're doing with Qualys though is we're trying to assist them in having one pane of glass to be able to look at their threat sources, from the outside and better understand what they need to remediate. So because we work down at the business unit level and it can be as small as we want to inside of the Qualys tool, they see just their assets, but the one person that is the security, the CISO, may I say, in this small organization is also the gentleman that patches these devices. So he's able to get a better understanding of his environment from a one-stop shop by
Right.
using all of your views that you have. What I'm looking forward to seeing in soon is to see where we're looking at logs as well, so that we can add one more factor to where we can actually validate. In other words, if all these things add up that there's an issue, it will identify it to us, and we know for sure we have to go tackle those faster than
Right.
just doing the regular patching.
Right. And that really goes to the bigger point of, today how we do security, too many different tools, too many different teams, and a lot of time that is spent just trying to get these tools to work with each other. And as you mentioned, if it's a large organization, maybe a larger office, you could manage something like that. But the architecture of the platform needs to support the ability to have distributed offices, multiple offices in different locations, and even provide those smaller offices their own visibility, their own view of what are the threats that are impacting them in a lot more of a self-service manner. And I think that's where the cloud-based architecture that Qualys has makes it a lot easier, because you don't have to deal with deploying a lot of tools or deploying different things in each individual location. And to the point of, again, with VMDR, it brings, as I mentioned earlier, it brings a lot of these different capabilities together in a single seamless workflow, single UI. And rightly pointed out, the next step is really how can we get additional insight by correlating the data, collecting additional logs, and that's something that we are working on, as I mentioned earlier, with the security analytics product, where being able to provide even more enrichment of what's happening on those devices by leveraging the same platform, same architecture. I think that will be, I really will be interested in hearing, your thoughts on that as we start working on getting that out for you to test. Now, again, all of this bringing multiple tools together, products together, as you mentioned today, you're using threat protect, IOC, and all of that. And with VMDR, one of the things that we've really brought to it, and I want to hear how you think about that, is that the response element, right? So for a long time, it's been about, here's what we do, here's the data we have, here's, you go to the SOC, and but a lot of times when you actually start to look at, well, I need this critical patch to be done, that's a lot of different teams in different locations and the silos, and it can take a long time sometimes to get those things remediated. And so I want to kind of hear your thoughts on what you think about
Sure.
the aspect of response combined together with that detection and the asset inventory and the detection piece as well.
Uh, My role to manage the vulnerability space and all issues related to exploits prompted me to push for agents. So we install agents on not only the mobile devices, but also on all servers. And there's a strategic reason for that. Is my intention is not to replace the regular patch management processes for big organizations like I work in here in the United States. It's well oiled, it works well, but it has happened with my CISO. He's come to me and said, can we get this critical patch out faster? And one of the things that I'm always struggling with is working with the teams and getting them to do everything in the speed that they normally function in, which is great for a regular cadence of the monthly patching. That works great. But what I'm looking for is a tool which you offer now, which is to use the patch management module. For the large corporations, we want to use it and have it available. So if there's something critical that has to go out today, immediately, my team can launch and push that patch so that we're protected as quickly as possible. Now, for the smaller organizations, okay, the ones that I was telling you are more like a mom and pop shop, they are going to be using that more in a production environment, to where they're going to do their normal cadence through the monthly cycles and try to use the Qualys tool to do all the patching. One of the benefits you also have with your tool, we've tested it, is that it validates immediately right after, once the patch is pushed, that there's no longer an issue. Sometimes with the other processes, you have a delay, you have to reboot the machine, or you have to change something in the registry, and it's not always done. Sometimes it fails to push. There's many, many different factors. Your tool, not only does it do it, but it actually checks right after to make sure that it is accomplished. So to me, it's a quicker turnaround.
That's the thing that you always keep getting, right? People come and say, okay, I have deployed the patch. Is it patch shared? Is the vulnerability gone? In my wall of shame, am I going to look good now? And with that immediate responsibility, I think that really helps to kind of validate that. And that's sort of why we try to focus on doing all of those things on a single agent, so that we can really bring not just the deployment, but also the fact that it's remediated, do that quick check, and move forward with that, so that the teams can themselves see the impact of that patch management activity that they have done. Now, I think you mentioned about the existing solutions that are working well, and there's teams that are used to using that. And now with this whole work from home, I think that has brought up some very new and interesting challenges, because and not just for your organization, but we see that using SCCM and some of these tools to deploy patches over VPN for 7,000-8,000 employees is just not feasible. And I'm curious to see what you're seeing, and how do you see that so what kind of technology or cloud-based technology would be something that would help in that situation, and if this is something that the Qualys agents capability actually does help.
The Qualys agent does have that capability, obviously, for the people that work from home. The difficulty again is to work with the teams. Again, it's not the technology that's the problem. It's always the process and the people.
Right.
So one of the things that we have to start looking at is being more agile. That's common in industry today. Everybody wants to move to an agile process. What agile means for us at Toyota is to not always be not always function in a traditional manner. If there is a need to function out of the box, we function out of the box. If we make a mistake, the idea is to recover quickly from that mistake. So that is why we push to have as many flexible tools as like the ones you offer in our tool set, in our quiver of tools.
Right. I think that brings up the larger question, which is, of course, you have been a great adopter of Qualys platform, and the ability to have these multiple capabilities or tools on the same platform. So you mentioned indication of compromise, file integrity monitoring. There are different things that you use from Qualys. So of course, the consolidation of the agent and having a single platform is one thing. How do you see that by having this data already brought together in one place and correlated, what value does that offer you compared to maybe having multiple tools and using a SIM or something like that to push the data? How do you see that helping, and what additional things can we do to bring more value on top of the analytics that data that we already collect will provide you?
The common struggle, I believe, in every organization, and please, I haven't only stayed at Toyota Financial Services. I worked in many of the other financial services in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex here. The biggest problem we always have is having the corporate metadata, the corporate knowledge inside of the reporting. The difficulty is never been to say, well, these Windows machines have these issues.
Right.
Your tool set has always been spectacular at that. The problem is giving it to the right person to remediate, because out of the 100, 50 belong to one team to remediate, 25 belong to another, and the other last 25 belong to the last team. So knowing which ones they are, how to distribute them, the way we're doing it is with tags. So we give tags and we associate tags. Now, today, that's still a manual process. You offer a ServiceNow plugin so that you can assist populating ServiceNow, because lots of times they don't populate their tool efficiently because their scanners don't necessarily scan everything as you do, as Qualys does. Qualys is spectacular for what it can pick up. So we provide data to the CMDB. We want the bidirectional pull data back so that it can populate tags for us, so that the native reporting out of Qualys and the dashboards can be tailored for the right audience, so that they only see their assets and they know that they have to prioritize them. Anytime you start showing data from other people, other teams, unless it's just for GWIS knowledge, everybody's always very gun shy because they don't want to try to be involved in somebody else's mess.
Yeah, I think that's integration with other tools like CMDB's ServiceNow is, of course, important to really get that holistic picture of your security program, because there's knowledge, as you said, about the business, which is maybe in other systems, other tools, and that's something that is required to bring additional sources of data together. One of the more specific questions I had was around you have IOC and file integrity and vulnerability management and on the same platform, does that offer you advantages to see malware related information in the same platform as vulnerability and you know unauthorized file events and all of that, uh, relative to, as I asked earlier, just being having multiple different platforms, each is just doing EDR or just vulnerability management or just file integrity, and then getting the context together. So that's one thing that we've really focused on, and I'm curious to see what's your view on that. Is that
Sure.
advantageous to go that way?
Yes, definitely. The use of the tool in the past years has always been a guidance tool to determine what to go fix, what to go patch. Uh, I have no doubt you realize that today so one of the things that we're trying to do now is part of our key risk indicator is to not only, we still look at the whole platform of all of the vulnerabilities that need to be fixed within the right severity levels, but we are now using the IOC and also the threat protect to prioritize so that instead of taking the regular patch cycle, the regular methodology, we tackle those on a faster cadence. So it really is, we're using that for our prioritization. It works much better in the smaller organizations where you have the one person who can make that decision of prioritization versus in the large organizations where this is the bundle I have to build to go patch everything. So again, it just depends on the flexibility of the staff.
Right.
Your tool is all about who the users are, and today you've customized it for the use by the all staff. So in other words, the people that do the bundles for the big tools like BigFix, okay, all the way down to the onesie twosies, just so that they know in their small organization, if they wish to reduce risk, they can do this.
Absolutely, you need that approach that cannot be a one size fits all, and so all of these integrations are quite important. And we at the end, it's all about prioritization to have an accurate response, right? Is to how do we weed
Yep.
out from a lot of noise? How do we have a platform that can really bring a lot of different types of information together, correlate that, and then precisely with no false positives, tell us exactly what needs to be fixed. And so, really interesting to hear your thoughts and opinion on these various aspects. And as always, thank you for being such a long time customer, and all of the feedback that you have provided over the years to make Qualys better is really valued. And I thank you again for taking the time, and hopefully I can give you some time back on your uh,
Thank you.
Tuesday afternoon here, and we can now uh, go to the Q&A section. But before that, again, I want to thank George for attending via VMDR Live, and we look forward to seeing more and helping you fix your security related issues in a much better and faster way.
Thank you very much for your time.